Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another day on planet Earth. And excuse me, today it's public holiday here in Australia for something we call Anzac Day. And Anzac Day is a day of remembering or remembrance for all of those soldiers from Australia and New Zealand that fought in the many wars that we've experienced as a species and lost their lives during those conflicts. And I think for me, sort of regardless of what we believe about war and whether it's a thing we should do, have to do, need to do, or whether it's stupid or silly or, a waste of lives, I think the key is to feel into the energy of these experiences and these events that play out. And although I'm not there at any of the events today, my family and my kids have gone in with their grandfather to honour his service and all of the friends that he lost during, one of the conflicts that he participated in. Was actually forced to participate in. Anyway, that's a whole other story. I think the key is to be feeling into the resonant frequency and energy of this. And for me, it's about that sort of commitment and sort of energy that these people sort of went into these events with. And I think it's also about looking at it, expanding our consciousness so that these things don't have to happen again. And I know they're happening all over the planet still. And I think this is why one of the most important things is that we, work on our frequency, our vibration, but also our consciousness. Because the interesting thing about frequency and vibration, and certainly the things around energy medicine and frequency medicine and those sort of things, is that it's really a consciousness state. And it's our ability to tap into a deeper part of reality, that more subtle frequency, energy part of reality that we know exists. And at this level, we get to tap into a deeper resonance, a deeper version of reality, or maybe an expanded version of reality. And I think possibly right now on the planet, that's what we need more than anything. To firstly stop any of these things happening again and losing, millions of lives again. But more importantly, to meet the new expanding tech reality that's unfolding in front of us, that being, artificial intelligence. And I think the biggest concern for so many people about AI is the consciousness behind the programming, or the current, not just the people who wrote the program, but also how we're putting information into the program and how the AI program is actually learning. And I think what's most important is that our consciousness keeps up with that. Our frequency, our vibration, our resonance keeps up with that. And it's kind of funny to watch how, excited people get about it, how committed they are to it. And I think there's an interesting correlation to the old times of when we went to war, and back in World War I and World War II and those sort of things, people voluntarily signed up and ran towards that because they had a whole lot of conviction around it. And unfortunately, what occurred is what occurred, and there's going to be all sorts of opinions about this, and I don't want to get caught in the opinion of it, because we can have all sorts of opinion around, honouring those that have, that gave their lives in those experiences, and certainly not playing any of that down, but also not getting caught up in the, good, bad, should we, shouldn't we, all those sort of things, and whether I'm being respectful or disrespectful in this moment, try to connect those sort of two things together. But I think it is a consciousness experience, with a more broader, expanded version of consciousness, with a more resonant frequency version of consciousness. We're less likely to do those things because we start to move into that next dimension of reality, which is much more heartfelt, much more heart-centered, much more community-orientated and collective sort of resonant frequency, and knowing or being more connected to each other, that where we won't do these sort of things, where we won't fall into that trap of hurting each other. And I think, obviously the next dimensions are way more about that. And the fun thing about the next dimensions is that it's consciousness that's going to help us to expand into that. So by expanding our own individual consciousness into that next dimension of reality, we get to bring that reality forward for everybody else. So those of us that are aware of this, that are maybe using things, tapping into resonant frequency patterns and energy medicine, and, who are more aware of what's going on, part of our responsibility is to step into and expand our consciousness. And maybe that's how we remember those that gave their lives for freedom, or whatever they want to call it. It's a bit ironic, I think, when they do call it that. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But I think our responsibility now is not necessarily to go back to war for freedom, but we go into expanding consciousness. And that's how we make sure none of those things happen again, because the more expanded our consciousness is, the more connected we become, not only to ourselves but to everybody else. The more we realize that we are one and that we all are all incredibly connected. So when we do, negative things to one person, we actually end up doing it to ourselves. I'm sure you're well aware of this, or, have that realization within you. But the more we can expand that consciousness, the better. So this month, or next month, we've got some really interesting events coming up to actually help to do this. We're going to continue our series of meditations. We're going to continue our series of quantum gateway or quantum coaching circle, live channeling, and an extra special event this week, this month, or May, for May, not April, obviously, for May, the Frequency Medicine Advantage, where I'm going to talk a whole lot about frequency and using frequencies to heal, but more importantly, using frequencies to expand consciousness. And it's kind of interesting, through all the years of research I've done and now sort of playing with frequencies, in my practice, which I've been doing for a number of years now, the link between frequency and consciousness is so intertwined. And there's been some fascinating sort of breakthroughs that we've seen using something that Armide has been showing us called consciousness technology. And she uses that word for my benefit more than anything, because she knows how much I'm a bit into tech and I love tech things. So she uses that word, to help, was to help me to dive down that rabbit hole even further. I don't believe it's really technology per se. It's something that we have within us already. We just have to expand into it. And so as we expand into the next dimension of reality, which I talk a lot about here, it is about expanding our consciousness. We can't go without that. It is about expanding our resonant frequency field. We can't go without that. And so there's this beautiful intertwine between frequency and consciousness and frequency, and for us to step into that next dimension of reality and really make the shift and make the move, because we have shifted some timelines. There are some living in one version of a timeline. Maybe that's a more, what we might think of as a more truthful timeline, and others who are still catching up with that timeline. And of course, as standard media presents more and more of the truth of the things that have been happening over the last whatever years, the more and more people start sort of stepping into that. But I think we can be really leaders within this by working on expanding our consciousness, and we can certainly use frequencies to help us to do that, because in that state we're going to heal faster, we're going to be more abundant, we're going to be more connected, we're going to have more success, whatever that might mean to you. We'll get out of some of the old patterns that we've been sort of coerced or pushed into around struggle, or around lack, or around all sorts of stuff. So I think it's time that we start to fully step into this. And on this day, this Remembrance Day, as I tune into the energy, and there's a lot of reverence that's playing out, there's a lot of sadness that's playing out in the energy here in Australia because of those events. I think the way we make sure those events never happen again, and the way we actually honour and remember those lost souls, those soldiers that gave their life for whatever the belief was at the time. Freedom, obviously, is a key. Doing right, or righting wrongs, or whatever, whatever it was about. I think the way we do that is expand our consciousness. We dive deeper into the frequency of that and what that means, and that we step into the next dimension of reality. And I think that's the best way we can honour those amazing people who gave their lives. I'm very lucky that none of my grandparents died during those conflicts. Very, very lucky, and that grandparents are still around from some of the later conflicts. But I know lots of people who did lose grandparents and those sort of things, great-grandparents, etc. So again, I think the best way we can remember them is to maybe step into consciousness, give more, some focus to that, give some energy around that, to work on that in our daily, lives, that we're present and conscious and we're expanding into the next dimension of reality. Anyway, that's my thoughts on today. For me, I think that's the best way to honour it, to feel into the energy and then expand out in all directions to shift the consciousness of the planet so these things never happen again, because they never have to happen again in a more expanded consciousness state. And I think that's the responsibility that we have. Anyway, I'm designing a whole lot of sort of events next month to help us to do exactly that. One of which is the Frequency Medicine Advantage. So love you to join, love you to come along. I'll put some posts up about that soon, and let's connect in and expand and step into that next dimension in every moment of our lives, so that we can make sure none of these sort of events ever have to happen again. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the day. Hope you're having a beautiful, amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you at some of our live events coming up soon. You'll see a post here in Heart of the Matrix with the times and days and all of that sort of stuff for the events, and I'd love you to join, so that together we can move this beautiful planet to the next most amazing dimension of reality, and that we can connect deeper and love more fully and honour each other in the most profound ways. Anyway, that's my dream. Don't know, what's your dream? What would you like to see on the planet? And maybe in the meditations and stuff we do, we can give some focus to some of those things. Anyway, love to know. Please please comment below and get involved, and together, we can make the really big difference. Anyway, don't forget, you're absolutely lovable, you're absolutely worthy, and it is absolutely time, and I'll see you real soon.